There is a lot of unrecognized effort that goes into making a good level. Something I say is, a work should be enjoyed with as much effort as was put into its creation. A lot of people, well, no, I don't want to accuse anyone of some bad practices without having specific examples to go with it. But even still, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people out there think that something like a level can just be built all quickly and willy-nilly like, and boom, it's done. A lot of people out there think it's all about making it look pretty and stuff, but there's a lot of subtle details that need to go in, that need to be taken care of, that need to be analyzed, that need to be examined. Take, for example, this is a small snippet of a level that I was starting to build. We have a main corridor here, and I threw it together a couple basic sectors just to give you guys an example of where this will be expanding out to. Obviously, down here in this corner we do have a small corridor leading out to another area. Also, I quickly made these 3 sections to demonstrate that this map will also proceed out in that direction and that direction from a junction in there, and on this there's another area that will proceed from there. That is the general idea of this small section of this map. Now, I put in these little column things on the corner, part of decoration, part of functionality, just to make things interesting, and it's not just a boring corridor. Now, when I was first putting them together, I actually had all of these placed, one over. In other words, they were originally there. But I didn't quite like the way it looked on the corners. It wasn't working right. So I moved them all over, which works a lot better, looks better, functions better. But over here, where we have this small hallway leading into this section, they were previously going to be a large pillar thing on each side of that hallway. But now, seeing as how they've moved over, it's not going to fit quite like that anymore. Well, it might be simple for one to think, okay, well, let's just move that corridor over a little bit so that it matches. Boom, like so. But see, here's the thing. With that corridor moved over, it's a lot easier to move. Here, let me grab my little player analog. Just so you know, this here is the same, this cylinder takes the same volume that a player does when moving through the level. So this is my player analog. And with that corridor moved over, you may notice it's going to take less time for the player to make it through that direction of that hallway, and take up more time to get there. Very slightly, very little, so it's not particularly a major point. But there are other factors that come in here just based off of a simple little thing like moving this one corridor little more than the width of a player. Now, when someone comes out of this corridor, coming out in this direction, look what happens. Here we are. They first take step out into this room. And you may notice that they can be seen and therefore shot at by another player from back here, all the way from back there. From this spot, a player also has a good vantage point at getting traffic coming from these two other corridors. Whereas if the corridor were moved up more, the player would be coming out higher and they wouldn't be quite so attackable from that angle. Now, it may not seem like a bad thing, it may seem like a kind of fun thing. You can sit there and you can watch over a large traffic area. But we don't want to make people who are simply moving in this direction to be paranoid about some player sitting over there who's just barely going to tag them and lay waste to them. I don't mean to imply that it is a better or worse type of scenario to have in this map, but moreover just that it's different from what I had originally intended. What I originally intended was that if you took that small course through there, you may of course need to be concerned about directly at the end of that hallway on your left, but you shouldn't have to worry about the hallway that it turns into as well. They're unconnected. They're two completely different paths, and you shouldn't have to be worrying about what's down that completely different path when you're not taking it. So what options does that leave me as the designer? Well, I could move this corridor over this way, and thus I could be capable of having pillars around it exactly on either side again, so that the doorway is shaped just normally again. But now I've made it considerably easier to move from this point to this direction, and just that much longer to move all the way down this corridor. Mostly this is going to have an effect on the psychology of the player, coercing them to take this path over this path, just because of what seems easy and natural for them, rather than having both paths seem equally natural. Sure, but at the same time, I've also made it so that a player can't sit here and be highly concealed and still able to launch little sniper attacks on all three areas out here. Moved over there, it's more balanced for that little corner, that little niche over there, but the spacing of this hallway has now changed from this, its original placement. This is where it really has the spacing that I'm looking for. It really has the area and movement that I want. So how do I go about doing this? Do I find some way that I can carefully graft an ornate archway over both of these sectors? Do I move the corridor so it's right between the two pillars? Not a bad idea. But even still, I have the options of moving it directly against this pillar or directly against that pillar. I'm not particularly going for a specific point of how a level should be built, how these things should be designed. I'm just pointing out that there's a lot to consider. There's a lot that has to go into these, even for just these subtle differences. Just a subtle amount of space has a great and dynamic effect on the flow of the entire level, its entire gameplay, and against all the strategies that a player can employ while playing that level. That's all I'm really trying to say.